First of all, welcome to today's webinar, The New Way of Running Payroll, Digitized, Automated, and Integrated. And thank you all for joining us. It's nice to see a number of familiar names as well as some new names in the webinar here. And I think many of us working in the payroll industry are painfully aware how payroll in many ways, in many places, still feels a bit like in this picture that we put up a bit provocatively, distinctly old school, I might say. And that's not in the kind of hipster, fashionable, old school type of way, but more in the dusty, antiquated way. So I'm excited to be hosting this webinar to talk to all of you about a topic that I'm personally very passionate about, namely how technology can help to drive transformation in the payroll world. A few quick housekeeping items for today's session. All lines, as I just mentioned, are put on mute to minimize the background noise. We will try to have some time at the end for Q&A, so you will be able to unmute yourself and ask questions at that point in time. If something comes up during the call you can't hear, or you lose somehow the visual, you can raise your hand or ask a question in the chat and someone will try to address those. This webinar is being recorded and made available online after the call, and we will also share the slides that we'll run through today in a follow-up email, so no need to take any sneaky screenshots. Not that I think there's too much secret stuff, secret sauce that will be spilling in this webinar anyways, but let's jump right into it. I can move the slide forward. Here we go. So just by way of introduction for those of you who don't know me yet and maybe haven't heard about Payzaar either, just a very brief introduction. I'm Mark Oliver Fiedler, been working in the broader IT software and services space for, by now, the better part of the last 20 years. Worked at a number of different companies before starting Payzaar in the kind of broader tech space, HP, Oracle, and ADP, and then started Payzaar about 4 years ago, and I'm the CEO of the company. I have an engineering background by education. From those days, tend to be very passionate and excited about anything to do with technology and innovation. A bit about Payzaar. Payzaar is the first open global payroll management solution, and the idea behind Payzaar is really allow you to manage all your local payrolls in one central platform. By doing so, we're looking to introduce process automation, data integration, and data aggregation, consolidated reporting wherever we can, and we'll talk a bit more about that throughout the presentation today. What makes our solution fundamentally different from many of the traditional solutions out there in the global payroll spaces? It's an open platform that's designed to work and interoperate essentially with any local payroll solution, whether you run your payroll in-house or outsourced, whether you want to use it with your existing local payroll solutions and vendors or with a new vendor. Our platform is designed to support all those different setups and scenarios. We're an Irish-based company. We, at the moment, support about 60 different clients across 70+ countries. We work with lots of different local payroll vendors by nature of our business, since we're an open platform. And we're very excited about what we're doing, and we're growing quite rapidly, and we're hoping to transform the industry with what we're doing. If you want to find out more about Payzaar, here's a mention of the website, or you can also send an email to us, and we're happy to tell you more about ourselves. So with that, let's jump right in here and talk a bit about what we're planning to cover in today's session. Very straightforward agenda, 3 main topics. Number one, I want to talk a bit about what are the key challenges that we're detecting in the payroll environment today. Secondly, I want to talk about what we see as opportunities for improvement. How can we overcome some of those challenges? And then thirdly, how do we drive change? There's different, fundamentally different approaches that we see. We can implement technology, innovation, technology enhancements into payroll operations. We'll talk about some of those different approaches and see what makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a bit about payroll and the payroll challenges that we're finding in a typical payroll environment today. Fundamentally, we think payroll challenges can be broken down in three distinct types of challenges. Number one, to start with, payroll operations tend, in most environments, still today tend to be fairly low tech, right? Still, there's lots of manual activity and interactions that need to take place, lots of spreadsheets being sent around, manual reviews and checks of data that's being generated that needs to take place, manual status checks being performed, manual reports being stitched together from various different spreadsheets into pivot tables and the like. So I think it's fair to say that it's not the technologically most advanced industry that that exists out there as a starting point. Number two, what makes payroll quite challenging is that by nature of what payroll is, it kind of exists and lives right at the intersection between the HR world of an organization and the finance world of an organization. And there's lots of overlapping data and information that's needed across all three parts, across HR, payroll, and finance. However, the reality in terms of the system landscape that exists in these different parts of the organization today is that in most places, they don't talk to each other, right? So they're quite siloed, which means there's lots of redundant data entry and re-entry, and that brings the risk of data errors and inconsistencies across those different systems. And then once you expand that picture now from everything I talked about here for the first two challenge areas applies to a local payroll environment, domestic payroll environment. But then once you apply that and expand that to a multi-country payroll environment, you get into the third challenge area, and that's that we find a typically very, very heterogeneous environment just by nature of how payroll works. Different local laws, different regulations. That means you end up having different local systems that help you to process payroll accurately according to local laws and legislations in different jurisdictions. You work with different vendors if you're leveraging an outsourced relationship, different processes, different reports. And so that means a huge amount of fragmentation from a process and from a data environment perspective. So with painting this picture, I think we can see that each of these three areas on their own already represent significant challenges and shortcomings, but when you take them all together, and that's typically what payroll teams, working in a multi-country payroll environment are facing. It's pretty much the perfect storm, right? And it's easy to see why many payroll departments month in, month out have to perform heroic efforts in order to make sure that their employees are getting paid accurately on time. And we know payroll always has to be 100% right 100% of the time. So working in this kind of environment is a fundamental challenge. And here's a little example of kind of what we're talking about. The realities that we're finding on the ground in the payroll world, just the kind of low tech nature, how many companies operate today. So on the left-hand side, this is an image that I actually saw recently. Someone post on LinkedIn. And it was a very nice post. The person was working in a global, or is working in a global payroll department, and shared that this is the way they manage their payroll calendar and the different payroll milestones across the organization, each color representing a different country and the kind of deadlines and due dates that are coming about. And you can see the little check marks, how they've checked off what's actually been done. While I like the colorful aspect of this image, and I really applaud the person that put this together to try to get some visibility into what's going on in all their different payrolls, I think it's easy to say that there are a number of real challenges that come with that kind of operating model. Number one, it relies on manual updates to collect the inputs and the status from each of the countries, either by phone or by email, which is quite cumbersome and time consuming. Secondly, there's no visibility for anyone beyond the person in whose office this whiteboard is sitting. And this was pre-COVID times, so we even wonder how that has transformed now into kind of remote work from home type of environments. But clearly, it's not easy to keep everyone in the team who needs to know what's going on in the loop with this kind of offline setup. And then, thirdly, you every month you wipe off the whiteboard, and there's no history left of how things progressed and how things worked out. On the right hand side, just a quick contrast. This is a screenshot from actually the Payzaar workflow and operations control module, and it shows you a dashboard, kind of a digital workflow that's built into the platform that allows you to manage through a 100% digital manner, and it's accessible anywhere, anytime. You can see exactly what's going on, what the status of the process is, who's working on what, and there's more details behind this kind of cockpit view, but it gives you full digital history of what's going on in the payroll environment. So this is just a very simple, but I think telling example of the low-tech state of affairs that many payrolls encounter today. And I'd say this is not an outlier. We find this kind of operating model still persistent in many organizations. So implications, I think, are probably quite clear from operating in this mode. When you don't have integration, you don't have automation, that leads to human errors. It means lots of redundant work, inflates the cost. It makes it very difficult to report when all your data sits in local data silos. You create compliance risk by not having visibility and controls into what's actually happening locally on the ground end. I think also in the context of the recent months with the global crisis that we've all been living through, it creates resilience risks, right? That you're kind of very dependent on key individuals in the organization when you haven't institutionalized and digitized your processes in a way where it's easy to switch things over to someone else picking up the ownership or responsibility for running forward with a specific task or a specific process when someone else is maybe not able to do that in the way they would normally take on that task and responsibility. So, talking about the current context that we're finding ourselves in, I think one of the questions that are always worthwhile asking is, so if this is kind of what we're facing at the moment, and the state of affairs that we're encountering today, then why change now? This is obviously not something that's just come about, but I think there's a number of key drivers that, in a way, maybe accelerate a need to transform, and a lot of it has to do with the last 12 months and the challenges that have come about. The Corona crisis, I think, has exposed in many ways weaknesses of the manual offline operating models that have been persistent. So when you operate remotely, collaboration and ability to create visibility into what's going on and keeping people connected becomes that much more important. And so I think that, if anything, drives a stronger need for technology and digitizing your payroll operational environment. Number two, I think there is an opportunity that has been created for payroll, which typically is not at the top of the priority list from an investment perspective in many organizations. I think people in many organizations we find have recognized that payroll is an absolutely mission critical function within the organization. When you're living in a crisis mode, you have to question what is essential for the operation of your business. And I think what many people have very quickly realized is that while it's possible to turn off or at least drive back other functions such as marketing or your production, your payroll absolutely needs to keep ticking away and needs to be working, if anything, at higher and more efficient levels than ever before. And so I think with that awareness that payroll is absolutely crucial to the ongoing operation of any business, there's an opportunity to also leverage that to drive more transformation and make the point with senior management that because it's so important, it's important to also invest in it and drive advancement and innovation into that part of the organization. And then thirdly, why we believe it's a great time to drive changes. Technology has come a long way. Today's solutions are being built on modern cloud-based technology that's nimble, that's easy to adopt and deploy, where you no longer need an army of IT consultants to bring about smart technology innovation into your organization. So I think these three factors together really are great catalysts to drive a adoption and kind of taking a fresh look at what's possible and how we can transform the payroll operations today. So next, I want to talk a bit more about where we believe there are some particularly interesting areas of opportunity to deploy smart and modern technology in order to improve payroll operations. And I think each payroll environment is different. Certainly from country to country, you have significant differences in how payroll is being run and executed. We believe that these 5 common areas that we'll talk about here are critical and fundamental and essentially apply to any local payroll environment, no matter where you're processing payroll. So let's talk about them a bit more. Number one, your workflow environment, how you transact and how you get your work, your tasks done. We already talked about the fact that in the typical operations, payroll operations that we see today, it's based on emails, and that brings a highly unstructured and also non-secure communication environment with itself, where things get easily lost, and it's just hard to manage a slew of data that's being transacted through emails. So we believe the transformation that needs to happen from an email operated environment is going to a digital workflow environment that makes it a lot easier to track what's going on, that helps to increase the coordination, transparency, how remote teams are working together, that allows you to create a powerful digital archive of every step, every approval, every document along the way of running your payroll process. So it's the first area I think that requires and deserves transformation, is just fundamentally your workflow environment. Second area is reporting. Payroll is an extremely data-rich environment. Yet we see, where we are today, there's lots of disjoint data, lots of, fragmented reports, local reports, and they're important at the local level, but they make it very hard to really see the bigger picture and start to see things and understand things in a broader context. If you want to do that, if you want to aggregate information across the entire organization, that typically means manually copying, pasting data from different spreadsheets into pivot tables in order to get any sort of cross-country analytics going. So we believe that needs to, and there's an opportunity to transform that with smart technology. And state of the art there is building dynamic reports, customizable reports that allow you to automatically pull data out of the different local payroll systems, consolidate them together, and allows the end user really to build their own ad hoc custom reports and analytics and queries out of that data. Third area that's tends to be very an area where payroll teams spend a lot of time is data preparation and also post payroll data consolidation in terms of getting data from payroll out into some of the downstream systems like your finance and accounting system. So there's a lot of manual data re-entry that takes place, taking data from your HR system and re-entering it into the payroll system, and vice versa from the payroll system, and getting that into the finance and accounting system. And this, of course, lends itself and is an area where there's huge opportunity to drive data integration and automated data feeds that essentially map data fields out of your HR system into your payroll systems, and data from your payroll system to map that and translate that and align that into your finance system, so it can be automatically transferred and exported out to those adjacent systems. Huge time saving, also huge opportunity to avoid data entry errors, which also leads then to the next point, data validation. So once you start to connect HR systems, payroll systems, finance systems, that allows you then to also drive tighter data checks. Today, in most organizations, we see that's one of the most time-consuming activities. So just as the data gets generated, as payroll is being calculated, to go back and cross-check, are all the values correct? We recently talked to an organization that told us that they spent 60% of their payroll team's time is just spent on doing various types of data validations. So and data validation is one of these things where smart technology is so much faster and more powerful than kind of any human eye can cross-check the information that's being sent through. So by automating this part of the value chain and building smart parameters into your operating environment, allow you to cross-check current month's data against previous month data, or input received against outputs generated, we believe creates huge efficiencies as well. And then let's not forget about the fact that at the end of the day, the end customer in a payroll environment, that's the employee. And how can we improve the employee's own payroll experience as well? Today, most employees receive their pay slips still either through an attachment in an email that they get sent, or sometimes actually still through paper delivery. In both models, there's security concerns about that sort of delivery mechanism, but it's also fundamentally not very user-friendly. Emails easily get lost. and ultimately puts the burden squarely on the employee to be organized and save all their pay slips in a structured and organized manner so they can find information again as and when they need to, versus introducing a employee portal, a type of delivery mechanism where the employees basically have access to the pay slips anytime from anywhere. The information is all nicely structured and archived and accessible for the employee whenever they need to or want to take a look at their information. Now, this is just at a high level describing some of the areas of opportunity that we see in the broader payroll environment. On this specific call, we won't have time to dig much deeper and kind of go into more showcasing of what modern state-of-the-art technologies can look like and what they can do. If you do have an interest in having a deeper conversation about any of these areas that we've outlined here, we would be very happy to set up some separate time. So drop us an email. You'll see a contact information at the end of the presentation, and we'd be happy to follow up with you and dig a bit deeper into these opportunity areas. The benefits, I think, are fairly, from building digitization, automation, integration into your payroll environment, hopefully are fairly self-evident. Improved process controls and governance is one thing that you can achieve by digitizing your processes and creating more central visibility into who's working on what and how the process is progressing. It helps to, of course, improve efficiency. The moment you take manual intervention out of the process, your team's productivity can go up. You're left to deal with fewer errors by making sure that the data is being captured from the source correctly the first time around. You're able to create deeper business insights through more powerful data aggregation and analytics that you're able to generate, provides you with insights into your employee data in ways that is simply not possible when you do that in a manual spreadsheet-based manner. It lowers business risk by structuring your processes, by creating digital workflows, and allowing different team members to have access into the payroll operation, jump in when needed. You reduce business risk. You also reduce business risk, by the way, from a just security perspective by managing your payroll operations in a central technology-enabled environment. And as we just talked about the employee pay slip experience, I think fundamentally there's opportunities to create a much better employee experience and tie the employee closer to the business and to the company as well with that. So, if you buy into these opportunities for improvements that we've outlined here, then the question becomes, of course, so how do I get from where we are today to driving these technology enhancements into your payroll operations? Well, that's not so easy, especially if you are a multinational organization and you're running payroll across lots of different jurisdictions. There's few important things to recognize. Number one, there isn't that one single global payroll solution that works everywhere. I think most of us are aware that doesn't exist. And so, payroll is complicated, and that means that we still need to rely on local payroll tools and local payroll engines that run the calculation, that understand the specific local tax and social security rules and can reflect that in the way the data is being processed. But that means also that you will have to work with different local systems, different local vendors, and that creates the complexity, and that creates a challenge in terms of being able to consistently roll out new tools and new technologies, not just into one specific part of the organization, but across the entire organization. So the question then is, if you do want to take advantage of modern technology and bring that into your payroll environment, what choice do you have? How can you go about doing that? And we believe fundamentally there's three different approaches that you can take to insert modern technology, digitization, automation into your payroll environment. Number one, you can work with your local payroll providers and really lean on them, push them to enhance their local payroll technologies and solutions, or where you find that the local payroll partner is not capable to enhance their technology environment. Obviously, we'll always have the choice to go out and find a different local partner. So that model can work quite well depending on the skills and the technology pedigree of the local payroll provider that you're encountering. And what's good about that is it allows you to drive specific improvements that are particularly important in the local payroll context. It does come with a number of challenges in terms of rolling out technology and innovation in this kind of local by local approach. You do have a high dependency on, so I just stated, the kind of agility and pedigree that you encounter with the local payroll partner. It's probably in that context also important to understand that a lot of ICPs do not own the local payroll technology that they're running the payroll on, which is normal. But it also means that their ability to control and bring new innovation into that local environment can be quite limited. In any case, you basically have to, it's kind of hand-to-hand combat, country by country. You have to, really put a lot of time and investment into trying to move things forward, improve things from one local payroll partner to another. And the challenge there, by the way, can also be, depending on, again, the size of the partner that you're working with, that can be a scale challenge in terms of just having the size of operation that allows the local partner to make the technology investment required. And at the end of the day, if you kind of go, about this in a country by country way, in all likelihood, you will still end up with kind of, different solutions country by country and lack the consistency across your international country environment. So then the second option is you can go out and hire a multi-country payroll aggregator and leverage their tools and their technology that they've built into their aggregator model. Now, the implication of that is the global aggregator will require you to basically rip out your existing local payroll. So the way that model works is you can't keep the existing local payroll vendors or solutions that you've put in place. You have to basically agree to work with and implement the local payroll solutions that the global aggregator brings into the picture. And that has a number of important implications to understand. To start off with, that can be extremely, or will be extremely, not just can be, will be extremely disruptive, because it essentially means that you have to go into each country and change out your existing local payroll environment. So massive change that's coming your way that way. We'll have no choice in terms of who will be the partner that's running local payroll. It's overall fairly rigid, this type of operating model. For example, you won't have the flexibility to choose whether you want to run your payroll in-house or outsourced, which is kind of hybrid model we find a lot of, especially larger multinational organizations tend to operate in. So that model is not really supported and suitable for the aggregator model. And then finally, typically that also comes with a fairly significant cost in terms of, first of all, the initial rollout implementation and the ongoing service fees that come with that model as well. Which brings us to third option. So third choice is you can adopt an open global payroll platform like Payzaar that is fundamentally designed to leverage your existing local payroll. So there's no rip and replace. If you want to keep your local payrolls, you can keep those in place. Or you can choose a new one where you feel you want to make a switch. And then it basically, the platform, this open platform that we're talking about, allows you to augment the local solution where it makes sense with smart technology, such as consolidated reporting and analytics, data import, export, and integration tools, the workflow digitization, automation that I talked about earlier, as well as employee self-service tools. So by wrapping the same technology platforms, kind of middleware layer around all the local solutions that you're already running, it essentially allows you to drive consistency across your payroll environment and allows you to roll out that kind of technology enablement and innovation faster into the entire organization rather than going country by country. This is kind of a more comprehensive approach to bring technology innovation into the organization while still benefiting, and that's very important, from the flexibility and choice in terms of the local payroll source. So that's kind of the distinction relative to the aggregator model, is you can still choose who you work with locally. You can still even run your payroll in-house if you want to, and still benefit from the technology enablement that the open platform brings with itself. And by virtue of this open platform being designed to be interoperable and being leverageable across all the different local payroll environments, that also means that there's a significant scale effect that we're able to bring to the table with this kind of model by basically leveraging any of our technology investments across various different countries and different local payroll environments. So these are the way we see it fundamentally, the three different ways you can go about rolling out technology transformation into your payroll operations. Each comes with its own opportunities and challenges, and fundamentally you can determine what makes the most sense for your specific situation and circumstances. So with that, let me move on here into summarizing and concluding a bit what we talked about today, what I shared with you. Number one, I think anyone working in payroll can probably agree that lots of payroll environments today are still low tech and especially in an international context exist in a fragmented world and fragmented environment. We talked about some of the significant opportunities to apply technology, automation, digitization, integration technologies across various areas of your payroll operations, your workflow management, your reporting analytics, your data integrations in and out of the payroll ecosystem, as well as bringing more modern, user-friendly ways of consuming payroll information for the end user, for the employees. We talked about the three fundamentally different rollout approaches that exist, and share with you a bit about the open platform model that we're driving, that minimize disruption while at the same time allowing you to introduce technology innovation across the entire organization. So that brings us to the end of my prepared remarks in terms of what we planned for today's session to give you a bit of a overview of our thinking around payroll technology innovation and how to bring digitization, automation, integration into a payroll environment. So with that, I want to open it up for any questions, any thoughts, any comments from folks on the line. If you want to ask a question, now's the time to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. See, and while people are thinking about their question or getting their microphone unmuted, you can see there's a couple questions in the chat. Oh, right. Just people apologizing for having to leave. That's fine. Okay. Any questions? Any thoughts? Any comments? Don't be shy. Any
from Payroll?
Yeah.
The question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm in the Netherlands, and I really like the presentation that you gave us. So it's really clear. Only thing I'm really missing in the open platform part is it seems that you're moving away from local ICP. But how about the payroll itself? You are connecting to the local payroll software, or did I miss something there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I apologize if that somehow sounded like we're moving away from the ICPs with the open platform approach. It's actually quite the opposite. We're very much aligning with and relying on the local ICPs. Because what the open platform approach is not, it's not replacing the local in-country payroll provider or the local in-country payroll system. So if you, for example, went into Payzaar and took a look at, the technology that comes with the Payzaar platform, there's no local payroll calculation tool that's built into the platform. So that's very important to point out. And so I'm glad you asked the question. We absolutely leverage the technology that is already in place at the country level. And we built data feeds and integration points between the middleware layer, this kind of represents the open platform, and the local ICP technology that exists in the local payroll environment in order to interoperate between those two and to elevate the information that comes out of the local payroll environment up to the level of the central platform.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Mark, this is Max also from NL. You got quite an attendance from our small little country.
I love it. I love it. I feel that.
Hey, just building maybe on Rolf's question, since you don't have any native cross-the-net engines, of course, in your open platform, what's the level of validation you do on a country-by-country level in the middleware to flush out any early errors before it goes to the ICP systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think there's a few different levels of validation that we try to achieve at the middleware level, and then there can be, of course, more validation that then also gets applied at the local level. So, for example, at the middleware level, some of the obvious and easy validations that you would expect to be able to achieve is payroll output prior period versus current period, right? Which is just a quick check to see, are there any strange outliers or behaviors? Not a perfect check, right? Because in some cases, you, based on the inputs, should see variances and deltas. But it's one checkpoint and one filter to apply to your data, to your calculations, to see is there anything that behaves in an unexpected weird manner. And then I think related to that, so the other validation that I think applies at the middleware layer, abstracted from the local country level, is some, I call it fundamental, basic validations between inputs outputs. Of course, anywhere where real sophisticated calculations get applied in the local payroll calculation tool, that kind of validation between your input and your output will become fairly hard to replicate at the middleware level. But where you're pushing through, let's say, a bonus payment, as a gross pay element, and now you just want to validate that that bonus payment that was supposed to be issued to Max, did that actually make it into the payroll calculation? Do we find that bonus payment again? Those kind of fairly point-to-point straight checks and comparisons. What did we push in? Did that find its way in the calculation coming out again? I think all those things are absolutely achievable and applied to the applicable to the middleware layer. Which doesn't mean, again, I think part of your question is, does that replace validation at the local level? And my answer to that would be no. I think there's still value in validations that can and should be done at the local level as
well. All right, thanks. And do you indulge me another question, or?
Let's see if anyone else has questions. Always happy to take a second one from you, Max. Anyone else? It's quickly becoming a Dutch show here.
I'm sorry.
No, nothing to apologize about, Max. Go ahead.
All right. I saw you show on the slide that you kind of have this live in 70 countries with around 80 different ICPs. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, since you've then kind of established connections or reports or interfaces, whatever your method of transfer is with all those ICPs, can you share any best practices of what you've seen on, when the data you receive from the clients, whether it's from their HR core or their time and attendance or whatever, and it flows through your system to those 80 providers? What is the level of automation you've been able to establish with all those different local ICPs?
Yeah, I think it varies, and it's a journey, right? Because there's sort of different dimensions of the automation, right? There's kind of automation within the payroll environment itself in terms of how we manage the tasks and the workflows and the operational steps of progressing the payroll. There's automation in terms of pulling together your data into sensible reports, and then there's automation of transforming your data so it can be used outside of the payroll environment, or can be imported from outside the payroll environment into the payroll, and vice versa. And so it really depends. In our case, I'd say, Max, depends on the specific client situation and client needs that drives that kind of degree of automation. At what level of automation we're operating? Is it just kind of in the payroll automation layer, or is it going broader into integrations into HR and finance systems? So I'm not sure there's a fast and true answer for by country or by specific provider. I'd say it's mostly driven by what the customer's objectives are and what they're trying to achieve, where the focus for the automation resides. Fundamentally, what I would say is it's hard. We believe it's hard to achieve strong automation integration pushing out of payroll if you haven't achieved a certain level of standardization and automation, digitization within your payroll workflows and ecosystem. Is then you're kind of moving on fairly. If every local payroll operates very differently, and now you're trying to connect those local payrolls out to your core HR system or your ERP finance system, that can be quite complex and challenging. So generally, our approach is, let's put some common standard processes and structures and tools in place around the just core payroll operations as a starting point, and then from there build out the data flows and integrations into whether it's HR, as one direction of integration, or into the finance world as the other direction.
Yeah, thanks.
Good, excellent. Thanks for the questions. Very good questions. Any other questions from the group?
Yeah, hi, Mark.
Hello.
Hello, yeah, this is Rafik from Payzaar.
Hi, Rafik. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I have a question, concerning the employee portal.
Mm-hmm.
You explained in your first slide that you have an employee portal when we can send payslips. My question is, it's a simple portal where we can upload payslips and the employee should download them and keep them in his disk drive or wherever, or print them, because as you know, in France since 2017 we can provide electronic payslips format. However, there are provisions. The employee must be informed, because he can refuse this. He can insist on receiving paper payslips, but also the storage of electronic payslips must allow free access to the payslips for 50 years, or until the employee reaches 75 years old.
Okay.
So my question is this box or this portal, employee portal system, is compliant with the storage and access requirement?
Yeah, it can be. It's a good example that you mentioned, because what you can do with the portal is basically, as an employer, you're able to upload and share the monthly payslips or weekly payslips, whatever it might be, with the employee, and so they will be archived in that central employee portal, the repository. The employee can have access for as long as the employer wants to give them access, right? So if the employee, let's say, for example, leaves the organization, but by law, as you just explained, in a country like France, you need to still allow the employee to access their digital payslip. You can have the employee retain that access, their login through the portal, for as long as they want, until I don't know how it works in France. If the employee says, I no longer want it or need it, is it then okay for the employer to switch that off? But essentially, there's to answer your question, there's no limitation in the time duration that that kind of portal could be made available and put at the disposal of the employee to access their information.
Clear. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. What we're seeing is, in most cases, and France might be slightly different in that sense in terms of regulatory constraints. In most places, the employer typically will, after the employee has left, maybe there's a certain transition period where they leave the portal switched on for the employee for another few months, 3 months or so, and then at some point they will kind of clean out the employee from the system and switch off the portal access. But it can be a nice thing, when someone moves company, and rather than them having to call the payroll department and say, hey, can you send me my past pay slips? I need them now to, I don't know, apply for a new whatever permit or need them for my taxes or something, then they still have access to it. Okay. Any other questions? So all very good questions. I like the group discussion here. All right. Well, perfect. Then we'll wrap it up here. If any other questions do come up, that maybe you didn't want to ask in the whole group here, or that come up as you think about what we discussed here some further, feel free to drop us an email. You can see the email address on this last slide here. And as I mentioned, we will share the slides in a follow-up email after the webinar, so you'll have access to what we discussed here today. Very good. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Hopefully this was informative and you enjoyed the session. And I look forward to hopefully talking to many of you again soon.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Much appreciated. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.